Hey folks, welcome back to the Evil Dungeon Master Universe podcast. I am your host, the Evil Dungeon Master Vince, and today is Wednesday, middle of the week, hump week. Got to get through that week, right folks? Anyway, ask the DM at theevildm.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter or X, whatever they want to call it these days, at the Evil DM. I'm at the Evil Dungeon Master on Threads. Oh, you want to hit me up there? I'm active on quite a few things. Or you can go to my website, theevildm.com, and contact me there. With all the commercial stuff out of the way, let's talk a little bit about Death Knights. I did an episode a few episodes back about the general Death Knight monster in Fiend Folio, where we went over the stats and stuff like that and how they are and different ways to use them. Now, one of the listeners on Twitter named Old Dirty Grognard wanted me to follow up on Death Knights, and he gave me some information he wanted me to look at. But while I was doing the digging at the information that he provided for me, I found a Dragon Magazine article, number 222, and on page 11, it starts at 10, but it's actually on 11 because 10 is just a big, giant, delicious graphic of a Death Knight. On page 11, it starts with a nice little story about Death Knights, and then after that nice little story, which I'll let you guys read on your own because it's a pretty interesting story, the article is by Ed Stark. And he goes into how to create a Death Knight from scratch. Pretty much the whole process, which I found rather interesting. Now, it came out in 95, so it's really not for first edition, but, second edition, first edition, most people have interchanged them pretty easily with not a problem. So he goes on to say the Death Knight is an NPC. Originally found in only the world of Corinne, Death Knights pervade the planes and the worlds of AD&D game like, undead warriors out for blood. They do battle with forces of good and evil alike, pursuing their nightmarish destinies on their own terms. They make your game a little more interesting in the process. The NPC Death Knight described in this article is based on the Death Knight entry from the Monstrous Manual, which is referring to second edition, tome for the AD&D game. The book features the basic Death Knight, a powerful, interesting adversary for the heroes in its own right, and a good place to start with this terrifying new NPC class. Now, when they say NPC class, that generally means NPC class, though does not mean that people have not used these NPC classes as PC classes. I myself have played a Death Knight, as I told you, in college, but we didn't use these rules here. We kind of just made it up as we went along with that DM. So, remember, just flip to page 11 in this Dragon Magazine of 222 if you want to follow along. All Death Knights were once proud and able warriors. Their statistics reflect this. Even in the most experienced Death Knight must have some ability before it died, or would have not been made a Death Knight in the first place. Incompetence is not the same as true evil, after all, though it may be, sometimes it feels like it. I like that whole thing. Incompetence is not the same as true evil. As a result, Death Knights seldom have any ability score below 10. The following chart shows how to determine a Death Knight's basic abilities. Now, I find this interesting that when you're making up this NPC, now I don't understand why they started saying NPC classes, but that's for another time. NPC for your campaign, they go over all the attributes, the characteristics they call them here, but it's attributes, and tell you what to roll. So there be it says seldom have anything below 10, which you can get two things below 10, but strength is 18 automatically, but you roll a D100. Has a little asterisk next to it. The Death Knight's strength may improve, so see below. The Constitution starts at 14, adding a D4. Dexterity is 12, adding a D6. Intelligence is one of the ones that you can get below 10, because it's 8, and you roll a D10. Wisdom is another one, 8 plus D10. Charisma is 10 plus 1d8. With two asterisks next to it, living beings may or may not find the Death Knights horrific in appearance, but there is no denying their presence or power of command. So again, we get the notion that charisma isn't exactly always considered beauty, even though the comeliness stat did not go any further than first edition. Though some people I know who played second edition did pull that stat forward and enjoyed using it, and nothing against that. If you like that in your game, that's how you play. All Death Knights are evil in alignment. Almost all are chaotic evil, but a few, 10%, are able to resist the chaotic pull of the undeath and stay lawful, 30%, or neutral, 70% evil. So there's a chance that they won't be chaotic evil when it comes to being a Death Knight. So I'm guessing when you do this roll, you should roll it, if you want to be fair, and just do it randomly rolled. If you get 10% and under, you have a chance to become either lawful or neutral, and then you roll your D100, and I would probably do it as anything 30 and below, you become lawful. Otherwise, you just become a neutral evil Death Knight. That's probably the best way to handle that. Death Knights seldom start out at first level. Whatever evil force created them usually rewards them with the power to reflect the evil might they had in their life. And because the Death Knight is intelligent and fairly independent creature, it can advance in levels after its creation. Death Knights use the same XP table as Rangers and Paladins, rolling a D10 for their hit points, and have the same rules, proficiencies, and weapon specializations as Warriors. So they use a Paladin and Ranger XP table, 10-sided die for hit points, and they use the Warrior table for their proficiencies and weapon specializations, which is pretty cool. Their THAC0, or 2-hit 0, or 2-hit AC 0, are the same as a Warrior of their level, though many Death Knights specialize in their chosen weapons and therefore gain certain bonuses in that. So we get a little inkling of what other things that they get, which is getting a specialization in a weapon and get more bonuses just for that alone. Death Knights make saving throws as either warriors or priests. Whichever save is better. Oh, well, okay, I had to go to the next page, but I like that. So you get a choice of whatever the saving throws, either warriors or priests or clerics and fighters, depending on what edition you're looking at, whichever one is better. They have no level limits, though a Death Knight over 9th level are extremely rare. Thank goodness in parentheses. Unlife abilities. Unlife. The evil creature that creates and motivates Death Knights rewarded servants with certain special abilities. All Death Knights have the following characteristics. And now we get into the nitty-gritty of what a Death Knight is granted. When a Death Knight performs an act of pure, unmitigated, imaginative evil, like the corrupting a lawful good character and convincing him to take evil actions, it gains 10% to its strength. Whoa. So corrupting people, making people do evil acts, you get a bonus to your strength every time you do it. I could totally see him finding, like, I don't know, an NPC that's pissed off, and he approaches him and he starts, gaslighting him about stuff and talking to him about stuff, and he's just like, you really could do better in life. You could do this, you could do that. And, his little growlish Batman voice, because of course that's how Death Knights speak, like Batman in my mind. And I don't know why. But you get 10% to your strength. So imagine that. But with each such act, it becomes more and more difficult for the Death Knight to gain another bonus. Thus, Death Knights with high strength bonuses are extremely inventive in their evil. So you got to do a lot of planning for the Death Knight. The strength incentive inspires them to new lows in evil. There are rumors that some Death Knights, by achieving acts of unspeakable horror and depravity, have actually advanced their undead strength beyond 18/00 limit and going up to 19 or 20 because they have done so fabulous with that ability. Unlike most on the other undead, Death Knights cannot be turned by a priest or a mythos of any mythos or level. So that's a little bit different. Okay. Death Knights can be dispelled by the holy word spell. There we go. However, and this is the one weakness that makes people hate and fear all good priests. So the holy word spell can be cast upon them and distraught of them, and they're dead. Just like most people forget that an evil cleric can turn a paladin and use unholy water on a paladin to damage him, which a lot of people forget about that. But anyway, each Death Knight gains a magic resistance to 30% plus 5% of the level of experience. A 4th level Death Knight has a 50% magic resistance, while a 9th level has 75%. However, no Death Knight may have a magic resistance higher than 95%. I think 95% is pretty solid. If they go any higher than 95%, what's the point? 100% magic resistance. Okay, so no spells ever work. All Death Knights involuntarily radiate a fear radius 5 feet. This sometimes makes their dealings with the living much more interesting. So it has a radius of fear, just like a paladin has the one of courage. I think it's the knight. Actually, the cavalier has the courage. I think a paladin has a courage one as well in later levels, but don't quote me on that one. Death Knights can use any magical item not prohibited to fighters. Some Death Knights who were multi-class or dual-classed in life, but lost the abilities in Undeath, can use Wizard 10%, Priest 15%, items as well. No Death Knight can use a potion or item that must be ingested, since it has no natural body functions. It cannot eat, drink, breathe, or even if it desired. So potions and things like that has to be ingested, like food that might have a magical effect or ability, doesn't work on him because he's really not breathing. He's not alive. He's dead. So, nice try. The forces of evil that created the Death Knight often provided with a magical weapon, armor, and other equipment it can use in a fight against good. The most basic magical item a Death Knight usually has is a magical sword or some other weapon like that. I mean, probably would give it a plus whatever sword, depending on what level. Definitely. Maybe even have it running around with that Vorpal sword. Ooh, that'd be pretty deadly. Imagine that. Every Death Knight has a 10% chance per level of gaining a roll on the table below. For example, on the table... Oh, it's up there. Okay. For example, if you create a 5th level Death Knight, check 5 times to see if he gains a magical weapon. All right. Once at 10%, then 20, then 30, then 40, and finally 50. Oh, I see. Okay, so every level gives you 10% chance to roll and see if you get a magic weapon on there. Okay. To reflect the 5 opportunities the knight has gained such weapons. Swords are listed, but feel free to substitute other weapons with corresponding powers. A Death Knight's magical weapon is not acquired in the manner of other such items. Okay. The weapon is usually placed where the Death Knight will only find it if he commits a terrible evil act. So he has to commit a terrible evil act, and once he does that, alright, once the Death Knight has rolled successfully for a special weapon, he can never roll again on the following table, even if he loses the weapon. Oh. So the weapon is it's a 1d6 table. So after you roll that percentage and you get under your percentage and you get it, or over, depending on how you want to handle it. If you want to do like the 15 over, 16 over, 70 and over, 80 over, 90 over. It really depends on the DM. I've seen some DMs do 10% with 90 and above. I usually do 10% and below because that's just how it seems like it should be to me, but someone will probably correct me with that. They have a d6 on this Death Knight's weapons. Longsword +2, two-handed sword +3, two-handed sword +4, short sword of quickness, short sword of dancing, short sword of life-stealing. Ooh, the life-stealing one would be perfect for a Death Knight, to be honest. Maybe I should do an episode on the sword of life-stealing. That'd be interesting. Did I do one on that? I don't think so. I'll have to look at my show docket and see what I have listed for AD&D stuff that I'm doing. Experience before and after death. As mentioned, living warriors who become Death Knights retain some of their experience and abilities depending on how evil they were in life and how terrible the forces of evil is that created them. I kind of like this backstory for a Death Knight, how someone created him and they give him all the tools to just go out in the world and strike evil on everything. Oh, man. For example, Lord Soth, one of my favorite Death Knights to read about when I read the Ravenloft books, most famous, if not most powerful Death Knight of all, murdered his wife so he could continue an affair with an elf maid. The fact that Lord Soth was supposedly an honorable knight of some, I never knew how to pronounce this, Salamania, I don't know, made it even more terrible crime, and even earned him the great power of being of his Death Knight career as he took over as a lord in Ravenloft. Really good book, real story, the Night of the Rose, I believe it's called. Really good book, really got me into reading the D&D Ravenloft books. Some of them were hit or miss, but that one was pretty good. It is unlikely that any force of evil, no matter how weak or powerful, would create a Death Knight at less than 4th level, except as an extraordinary punishment for a warrior who once fought against evil, but finally succumbed to. Oh, that'd be an interesting backstory for a Death Knight. Begin your Death Knight NPC at the lowest experience level total possible for the level desired, and let it progress using the Ranger Paladin XP in the player's handbook. Remember, Death Knights should use the same rules and proficiencies and specializations as living warriors, so to determine their abilities along those lines. Alright. As do some living creatures, Death Knights earn more abilities as they achieve higher levels of experience. So 4th level, they got a 5-foot radius and fear and can detect magic and invisibility at will. 5th level, they gain Dispel Magic twice per day. 6th level, Wall of Ice at will. Oh my god. 7th level, they can cast one of the following spells once per day. Power Word, blah, 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 blah. All the power words, pretty much. 8th level, it can cast Symbol of Fear, Symbol of Pain once per day. 9th level, it could do Fireball once per day. So that's pretty amazing, some of those abilities that he gets. All the Death Knight's magical spells function as twice its own level of ability to a maximum of 20th level. For example, 2nd level Death Knight casts spells at 4th level. My god. Imagine casting that Fireball at 18th level. I could see why a bunch of people got wiped out by Death Knights in some of the modules. Companions of Evil. Upon choosing 9th level, Death Knight becomes an extraordinary force of evil in its own right. It begins to radiate dread and undeath wherever it goes, and other undead sense and seek out the source of this evil. The Death Knight attracts undead followers and allies that can use to hatch and execute schemes. So is that like Evil Ash from Army of Darkness? Because he was like a Death Knight and he got all those undead followers? I don't know. You tell me. Sounds like it could be. Undead followers. The followers of the Death Knight include skeletons, zombies, ghouls, ghast, wights, and other low-intelligence undead that may be wandering around the DM's chosen world. These creatures feel the evil in the Death Knight and rise from the resting places, wandering by twilight and darkness towards the Death Knight's humble abode. I added humble there. Knowing that they must serve a power greater and more evil than their own. For every month the Death Knight spends in a particular area, he attracts 1d20 undead followers of that type. Many Death Knights actually loathe these followers and either assign them menial or pointless tasks like digging a hole through the earth or carrying water from the sea to a river to get them out of the way, or send them on a suicide mission against more powerful foes like walled towns or armed citadels. The undead respond without question and they obey the Death Knight. That's all they contemplate doing. Okay. The most common use of a Death Knight has for its undead followers is to disturb the living. The Death Knight can use minions to raid villages, carry off the living, and wipe out caravan. Yeah, it looks like Evil Ash from Army of Darkness, to be honest. And that'd be a perfect bad guy for your campaign. Undead allies. Once per month, the Death Knight has the chance to attract a powerful undead ally, such as the Lich, Vampire, Skeleton Warrior, and other creatures. This chance is equal to 5% per the level of the Death Knight. The ally arrives at the Death Knight's lair as a possible servitor, master, or partner in evil, depending on the Death Knight's power and prestige. For example, a newly arrived Death Knight could attract a powerful Lich that would attempt to subvert it and force the Death Knight to do its will, resulting in a battle of two creatures. Most likely, however, the force of the evil that controls the Death Knight keeps the two from becoming deadly enemies. And they work together, at least at first, to plague the living. Once the Death Knight has attracted an undead ally, it will know we will not attract another until its first has been departed or destroyed. It continues to attract undead followers, however. And then we have some suggestions how to use them in the adventure. I'll let you read that on your own because it's some interesting things to talk about. A final word, though, this article must end. There is no end to the usefulness of a Death Knight as an NPC villain. I absolutely agree. It's one of my favorite big bads to use as some type of evil, dark Death Knight. The Death Knight begins as a tragic character that PCs might actually feel sorry for and may find about its history as they do a little bit more looking into him, but it becomes a terrifying evil that must not be allowed to roam the earths freely. So the players will have to figure out what it must do, and the Death Knight must be destroyed. I mean, it's not just a villain, it's a promise. PCs who ignore their alignments break their vows, or make the hard choice too easily and without consequence can look at the Death Knight and wonder, how far away am I from that? Interesting conclusion to that article. Well, I hope you've look into the Death Knight part 1. I'm going to continue digging for the Death Knight to see if I can find out more about the 13 Death Knights. I don't think it was ever fleshed out in AD&D as far as 1E and 2E. You 2E fans out there could probably tell me better. But I know it was fleshed out in 3rd edition, and they actually named them. I mean, I did them as a kid. I did 6 of them when I was working with my friend in his backyard, but I don't remember what we wrote or even said. I wish I still had that paperwork, because it was kind of cool. We were sitting there, like, just throwing stupid ideas out for a Death Knight. I don't know. Anyway, theevildm.com is my website. Tell me what you think in the comments. You can support me by going to buycoffee.com/theevildm or ko-fi.com/theevildm if you want to support me there. Other than that, keep it original, keep it old school, and keep those AD&D fires lit. Good night, everybody.